Now, unless of course you've been living underneath a rock ever since the 70s, Star Wars is massive and has been a huge part of history, especially for those that love this adventure set in space.
You're goddamn right.
And seeing it's the month of May, well, one day in particular is known as Star Wars Day, I thought to myself, why not take a brief look at some of the video games surrounding the wonderful world of Star Wars. A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, Star Wars was born, a space saga that captured the hearts of millions of fans all around the world. And eventually, this beloved franchise would make its mark on the amazing world of gaming.
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Landing on the Atari 2600 in the early 80s was Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back. And with its basic graphics and its addictive gameplay, this title set the foundations for other games within the Star Wars mythos that would eventually appear on Atari's home console, as well as in the arcade. As history will tell you, the popularity surrounding the Atari would soon start to slow down, with focus now on a rising star, which was in the form of the Nintendo Entertainment System.
Now you're playing with power.
Taking advantage of the superior graphical power of the NES, Star Wars showcased a mixture of gameplay elements. Combining platforming and side-scrolling shooting was a great idea, but it was the lightsaber battles that made Star Wars for the NES such a joy to play.
It's so bad.
Now, for those that played the early Star Wars games, they've always fantasized about becoming a Jedi or even a Sith Lord, being able to use a lightsaber as well as the Force. And speaking of lightsabers, the closest thing we could do while growing up to emulate what we saw on the screen was by using a cardboard tube. Now, don't deny that when you got your hands on a tube, that you've always pretended it's a lightsaber, you know, swinging it around and making all the noises.
6 hours later.
Yeah, sorry about that. Once you get going, you can never stop. But anyway, when it came to the golden age of gaming, Star Wars soon found a home within the 16-bit era. Very much like the films, the Star Wars games that appeared on the Super Nintendo soon became a trilogy, as well as a must-have for any gamer. Now, this trio did feel ahead of its time and set the standard for future Star Wars titles, and as technology improved, so did the games. More and more Star Wars titles would be released for the various gaming systems of the time, but it seemed that the realm of PC gaming is where the franchise would gain even more popularity. Titles such as Star Wars X-Wing and its 2 sequels allow players to take on the role of being a pilot, both for the Rebel Alliance and the Empire. As popular as those games were, there were other titles that revolutionised exactly how players experienced Star Wars, and these games were Dark Forces, Jedi Knight, and of course Shadows of the Empire.
Nice.
Dark Forces was a first-person shooter that saw players taking on the role of a mercenary named Kyle Katarn, who was hired by the Rebel Alliance to stop the Empire from creating a new superweapon. Obviously, this wouldn't be the only time that players got to step into the role of Kyle Katarn. Thanks to the success of Dark Forces, a sequel would soon follow, named Jedi Knight Dark Forces 2. In this popular title, gamers were taken on an adventure that saw Kyle Katarn begin his journey to becoming a Jedi. And throughout Jedi Knight, players were introduced to the 2 sides of the Force, where certain actions would have an impact on the overall outcome. And it's these choices that created that immersive experience for gamers. Now players could decide the fate of the foes that they dealt with. They could either let them live or strike them down in anger with their lightsaber. Yeah, we know what happened last time. Obviously, using a lightsaber is always fun, but there was a way of making it even more amusing, especially when you inputted a certain code into Jedi Knight. Let's just say that stormtroopers would lose an arm or 2.
I've had worse.
At the same time when Jedi Knight was released over the N64, gamers were treated to Shadows of the Empire, which was an action-adventure game that followed the story of a mercenary named Dash Rendar. Dash was a lovable rogue very much like Han Solo, but Shadows of the Empire wasn't the only Star Wars game to appear on the Nintendo 64. Players were also blessed was Star Wars Episode 1 Racer. In this popular title, gamers would speed their way through various courses, with some appearing from Star Wars Episode 1, and from here, more diverse games would be released, such as Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. This role-playing game was set thousands of years before the events of the movies, but there was another set of games that allowed players to go into the front line wielding a blaster or two. And the games I'm talking about are of course a Battlefront series. Yes! The Battlefront series of Star Wars games were extremely popular, with each of them having their own following, and fans would often debate as to which one was better. But there was another franchise that still has a partnership with Star Wars, and even now remains very popular with gamers. I am of course referring to the LEGO Star Wars games that have a certain charm about them, especially with their easy to pick up playstyle.
Pew, pew. Gotcha.
Obviously a must have for any Star Wars fan, but I have a question for you guys at home. Who's your favourite Star Wars character and why? Let me know in the comments.
Okay.
In recent years, the Star Wars franchise has continued to evolve, with the release of Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, as well as its highly anticipated sequel. And it's great to see how far Star Wars games have come ever since the classic Atari titles. Star Wars itself has had a long and diverse history with the world of video games, and with more titles on the horizon, it's pretty safe to say that the Force is strong when it comes to the magic of Star Wars. Wow. Anyway, come back next time for another Origins video, but this time around it's on the Doom Slayer. Thank you so much for watching, and see you next game.